Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and welcome to my astrology channel. This is where I try to make sense of astrology and enable you to take a lot from it in terms of a heads up about what's coming along, and also to kind of broaden your basic understanding of astrology, which isn't really and truly just about sun signs. It's about a much more complex pattern. And we're going to be talking about that a bit more on this video. So I'm going to begin with the new moon. And this is going to be the new moon in Leo on the 19th of August. Now, we get a new moon and a full moon every 28 days. And of course, it's in different signs and in different parts of our solar charts. But in my last video, I talked about pairings. And that means a new moon and a full moon. Now, not the new moon followed by the full moon, but the new moon in one sign that 6 months later has a full moon in that same sign. And these are interlinked. So when we look at this new moon in Leo, we're going to be looking at the full moon in Leo, which occurs next year on the 28th of January. So we have about 6 months in between these two times. And because a new moon is about new beginnings and new openings, it's the waxing cycle, what you set in motion now. And in a way, this needs to be something that's thought. If you think about something that might take 6 months to complete, and we're talking about Leo here, let's say, I'm just picking at random, that you really want to get fitter and stronger. And so you put a program together for 6 months. You start now or on the 19th of August, and then when you get to the 28th of January, you will have completed that cycle and you will have seen how well you accomplish that. So that's a way of sort of using these new moon, full moon pairings. But of course, things just tend to happen around a new moon. And often you'll find 6 months later, they have a reference, events have a reference to that new moon. In fact, I talked about this on my last video when I looked at the new moon in Aquarius on the 24th of January and its relation to the full moon in Aquarius on the 3rd of August. And I took as my guide here, I looked at Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, because of course she and Harry left around that time, left the royal family to begin a new life on their own, separate from the family. And 6 months later, they have an opportunity to see where they are. And in fact, that particular date, the 3rd of August, 3rd, 4th of August, was actually Meghan's birthday because she is a Leo. And it was quite important that day because she did win a slight victory in the case against the Daily Mail, or the Mail on Sunday, sorry. And that meant that the names of her friends or her friends were to remain anonymous. So you can see how periods of time are linked, and how if we look at the new moon, full moon cycle, and we think at new moons, we're beginning things, we're setting things in motion. And at the full moons, we're completing something, closure and completion. And of course, that process being mirrored as well by events that simply happen. So we talked about Leo here because that new moon is in Leo. But of course, if you have Leo rising or Leo on your midheaven, then of course this new moon is going to be very pertinent to you, and that everything I've just said about new beginnings, openings, fresh starts, setting things in motion is a really dynamic kind of theme really to be working with around the 19th of August and the 2 weeks following that. And of course, also we want to look at the sun signs here. So we see that Aquarius and Taurus and Scorpio, these 3 signs other than Leo, also see this new moon or have this new moon as a significant portent of things that are going to be beginning and things that you might start to begin, because those 4 signs, if we look at the horoscope circle, we look at the houses of the horoscope, they in fact are in the angular houses, and the angular houses are always very dynamic. Now, I want to talk a little bit about going back to the idea of the new moon on the 19th of August and the full moon on the 28th of January next year. What is very interesting about this is that on the 28th of January, 28th, 29th of January, the sun will be conjunct Jupiter because Jupiter will be in Aquarius. So this full moon is, the sun is conjunct Jupiter and the moon is opposing that sun-Jupiter conjunction. And that is a very expansive, very successful, very fulfilling kind of full moon. And so you can look 6 months ahead and pop it in your agenda or your diary, however you do these things, and look at that period of time as being one of great fulfillment, of the achievement of many things. And certainly just generally, if we look at that time towards the middle end of January next year, it looks to be a time when we've got a little bit more good news. And I'm reminded a little bit of the question that I got asked this week, actually by 2 or 3 people. And it was, when will this pandemic end? And, I've been fairly straightforward about the whole of the coronavirus, saying we're in this for the long haul. But I did look at the shadow cycles of Saturn and Pluto, which both end in January. So I certainly see January as marking an important point in the whole of the coronavirus story. And I see it as a positive, not as a negative. But I think in all honesty, now we've lived with coronavirus for so many months, we can see quite clearly it's so infectious, it's not going to end like SARS or MERS that weren't that infectious and therefore just ran out of hosts to host the virus. This is not that. It means it's like flu in terms of its regularity. We're going to have to keep living with it for a long time. If that answers your question, good. But yes, put ourselves on a kind of long haul timing. That's going to be a good thing to do. Now, another thing that sort of came up in the last couple of weeks, one of my editors, one of the magazines I work for, sent me a panic email saying, what should we do? There are 13 signs of the zodiac. Do you need to now add another 13th sign in your column? Well, of course, this is not the first time this old raspberry about 13 signs of the zodiac has come up. It came up a couple of years ago. It came up back in 1997. So it has a regular kind of airing by the scientific fraternity who go to great lengths to try to portray astrology as being completely, unviable because we don't take the constellations, and especially this constellation of Ophicus, into consideration. Well, let me just blow that out of the water right away. Astrology, certainly Western astrology, tropical astrology, as we call it, is based on the seasons. It's a mathematical division, if you like, of the path of the sun round the earth, or, obviously the earth goes round the sun, but bear with me, just trust me. And it's an equal division, 360 degrees of the circle equally divided into 12 30-degree parts. That's how we do it. And of course, it's very seasonal because with regularity, the sun comes into 0 degrees of Aries on the 21st of March or around there, the first day of spring, and halfway through the year, as the sun enters Cancer, we have midsummer, the sun high overhead. And so we can see that we track our calendar year and our calendar zodiac around with the movements of the solar system, if you like. That's the way to look at it. The fact that the zodiac reflects the constellations was a very, very long time ago, when any remote sense that the sun would be seen against the background of its correct constellation long gone, due again to astronomical factors. Let's just leave it at that. And in fact, so it makes absolutely no difference at all whether you decide to look at that constellation Ophicus, which is sort of between Scorpio and Sagittarius. If you look at the night sky, it's going to have absolutely no bearing on your sun sign in terms of astrology. Let's blow that out of the water. But it also leads me on to something that I was talking about on my Friday Bite this week. I was looking at the events in Lebanon with the terrible explosion that left so many dead, so many injured. It's just flattened most of Beirut. And of course, it comes at a time when Lebanon is struggling economically. The government is not the kind of government you want in charge in a crisis. And, we looked at what was going on at that time, and not only the full moon, which tends to bring simmering situations to the bubble, which it certainly did in that case, but also we had Mercury angling planet Uranus, a square aspect, and we had Mars coming up to angle Pluto. And these two are these two kind of influences are what you might call explosive, and certainly very powerful change bringers, whether that's in the good way that we need to change and transform, as we do with Pluto, but also there's change that comes about abruptly, suddenly, and very destructively. And that's also reflecting the qualities, or what we understand, the properties of Uranus and Pluto are. Now, in my Friday Divide, I talked about, don't get the idea, because I'm talking about Mercury and Uranus being there and Mars and Pluto at the time of this great explosion and other things that were very destructive recently. They don't cause anything. It's just a way we have sometimes of saying it. In my own opinion, what we're looking at with astrology, and I call it it's the narrative of our times, as the planets move in their cycles, and we can see these. If we want to look to 2030, 2040, 2050, we know where the planets are and what kind of alignments they're forging one with the other. And I always talk about them as being the narrative of the times, and that they reflect and resonate with the things going on. Now, that doesn't render astrology null and void, in the sense that why would we bother with it if we can't kind of use it? What we do with astrology is look ahead at those configurations and say, what is the most likely manifestation of this configuration? We look at the past, we look at what history tells us. We also take into consideration the times we live in, because this is the 20th century and not the 14th century, where life was very different. And then we make an assessment of what that flavor might be. Now, I am not ruling out any kind of connection between the planets and ourselves, in the sense of, are we one and the same? And I don't want to look at a cause and effect principle, but when I think about the Big Bang and all the billions, gazillions, and trillions of bits and pieces of that Big Bang formed together into the solar system, and of course we grow out of all of that. And so at some level, some microcosmic, subatomic level, we are all part of it. But I try personally to move away from the idea that Mars in Aries makes us this or that, or makes that happen. I like to think in terms more of the resonating with those themes we know all too well. So moving on a little bit more, I want to also come back to the year beginning 2020. And, there has been a lot of criticism about, the fact that if astrology is any use at all, why didn't you tell us there was going to be a virus and a pandemic? Why didn't you come up with that? And as you know, as I've explained before, maybe psychics or people who see events very literally along some kind of cosmic screen, they may see an event. But astrologers, working astrologers like myself, have to use our noddle, our brain, to try to figure out what it is. So we could see years in advance, if you like, that at the beginning of 2020, on that cluster of the Sun conjunct Mercury, conjunct the Saturn, Pluto conjunction with Jupiter bringing up the rear, there was going to be a mighty development. And that development was going to affect all of us. It was going to be world-changing, life-changing. And of course, we can see as the months have gone by, exactly what that is. And we know, or should know by now, that life is never going to be the same. It's always going to be different. So I want to take a look at this again and look at that Saturn-Pluto conjunction in terms of its great message for us all. You know, Saturn particularly is about time. It's about things coming together in time. It's about actions having consequences. It's about karma. And you put Pluto into the midst, which is about transformation, elimination, and transformation. And you could see that that idea of karma, the reaping of karma, was certainly going to be part and parcel of experience globally in 2020. So we could look at that and see that. But I want to take that a little bit further and say it's not just about reaping karma, but it's about sowing it. So there's not only the acceptance of things that have happened in the past that now need to be accounted for, but it's the actions we take now that will have repercussions in the future. And that is certainly something we have control over. We react to the circumstances that are dropped on our plates, so to speak, and we have to deal with them. But how we deal with them, what we do next, how we think about our lives, the actions we take, that's sowing future karma. And although it's very easy to look at, let's say, for instance, the recent events in Lebanon, and that came really on a Mercury-Saturn opposition, Mercury squaring Uranus, Mars squaring Pluto. So we really have that theme of karma, actions having consequences, you know, speaking long and loud through that event. The government are clearly to blame for not dealing with the amount of ammonium nitrate they had stored. Nobody took responsibility for it, they just left it there. So actions have consequences, and we can lay the responsibility at the feet of the Lebanese government for not taking action. But it's what they do next. And maybe also in the process of that event, galvanizing the world, if you like, to help Lebanon, to putting the spotlight on all the infrastructures and the really, really dreadful state of affairs, the lack of services that's happening in Lebanon to try to get this right now. So we're in the process, or Lebanon is in the process. We're all helping towards it. The government in the process of sowing the seeds of future karma. So good actions, sensible actions count, which then brings it back to each one of us. And we do look out on the world stage. We do think about the things that are happening in the world or happening to our friends and family. And we think we're powerless to help. And we'd like to help, but we're powerless. Well, we're not completely powerless because we have our own world. We have our own responsibilities. And if we act with grace, if we act with consideration for everyone else, if we act responsibly with an idea to the future, the planet we want to protect, the life we want to preserve, the family we love, the things we love, then each one of us contributes to that future that is evolving now by taking responsibility and by performing right action. So we've come a little bit of a journey in our video this week when I've talked about new moons, new beginnings, and how that cycle will be completed for Leos, seriously Leos, in the end of January 2021, and also for Taurians and Scorpios and Aquarians. We've moved on from there to look at the other factors that are in our astrological world at the moment, and looked at them with a view to not it's all happening out there and it's all happening to everybody else. You know, I can just sit back and look at it, or there is nothing I can do to change it, when in fact there is. And that really is the message that I want to leave you with today, is that we can affect our world. We do affect our world. And with more awareness and thought, we can affect it for the better. Thank you for watching. And I look forward to the next time. Bye for now.